Okay, welcome everyone to our live conversation with an EHE alumni sharing his job search journey with us today. And I would like to include and introduce the panel that will also be answering questions toward the end of the presentation. So our alumni is Frank Chen. He got his undergrad degree here in hospitality management. And then Amanda Yusko, who is from the Office of International Affairs. And then myself, I'm Nancy Dugan, and I'm the Director of Career Development for the college. So welcome everyone. And I'm just going to hand off to Frank now, and he's going to share a PowerPoint and some really great information for us today.
All right, awesome. Let me get the share screen started here. Welcome everybody. All right. All right, is everybody seeing the presentation okay? Cool. All right, so welcome all the current students at OSU. My name is Frank Chen. I graduated in 2017 in the hospitality program from the EHE College. I'm originally from China, but I've been in the US this is my 9th year now. So it's been a long journey for sure. And today I'm going to talk a lot about job search or career development in general in the US as an international student. So first, a little bit more background on myself. I started at OSU in 2012 as an undergraduate student, and it took me 5 years to finish as I did a dual degree program for Fisher and hospitality management. So one big shout out to the Hospitality Manager Association, which really helped me grow and became who I am today. And then I also did a lot of on-campus activities and other involvement as well. So it was a very rewarding experience that OSU had the privilege to provide. And then I started my own career in hospitality as an intern in 2013. It took me on and off 5 years from intern to frontline to manager to eventually a director position in about 5 years. During the process, especially while I was in college, Nancy and Amanda, they're both almost my best friends in there because one helped with the career and job search, and the other one helps all the documentation, immigration status change, and everything throughout the college life. And I also did a little bit of consulting on operations, and I have a little bit of entrepreneurial ventures going on right now. So right now, I'm also starting a new career in commercial real estate. I'm currently working for a national franchise builder, so as a data agent. So at this point, I'm going to go into today's presentation. So first, from my own experience in the job search, I have a few key lessons that I learned. I wish I would have known when I started. First, you have to really master your craft, meaning you have to be aiming at your best in your field. No matter it's academics or no matter it's for us, hospitality is more practical. So in terms of that, we'll be doing a lot of internship and practical experiences. No matter which field you're in, try to be at the best if you can in that field. That's your foundation of a job search. The second thing, I got asked a lot from job hunters is whether I should go for a balanced skill set or whether I should go for a specialized skill set. And then to answer the question, I want to divide it into kind of stages in your career as well. When you're in college, not a lot of people are very, very sure what they're going to do, as a lot of things still might change in the future. So at this point, I usually suggest students to be more balanced. As in, you try a lot of different things and try to build a little bit of an understanding of all the fields that you might encounter. Then as you move forward and move deeper into your career, then become more specialized in those skill sets and build sort of like a skill tree along those branches. Then you move on to further down in your career. That's in terms of a skill set in your job search. These two to me are really the foundation of any successful job search, because that's who you are and what you have to offer to the employers out there. Then the rest of it is sort of what we're really talking about today, is that some of the tools, techniques, also some of the networking skills that you can have during the job search process. One, it's an understatement to say that networking can change your game. It brought me where I am today, and it can take me where I want to be in the future. It's a very, very important point that if you're good at networking, a lot of things can become possible. And to be specific, it's about who you know and how they know you. A lot of people see networking as a who you know process, but also it's very important that how they remember you is also a very critical point. Then the next lesson I learned is know your value, even though some of them may not recognize it. This, I personally experienced it. When you're entering an interview doing job search, this particular employer might not recognize you because their background, circumstances, they might not recognize your full value. But it doesn't mean that you don't have that. You should have the confidence saying, I just need to find the right person and right employer to apply the value that I have in me. As long as you did the first two, be confident in this one. So because you are valuable, you are special in a way. And then the last lessons I tend to summarize, it's okay to change your career, which I'm undergoing one right now. And I'm always on the edge of trying to change or thinking about change in terms of my career. Don't be scared. As long as you're well positioned and well thought out, I think it takes a little courage to change your career at some point, but also it takes more courage to not make the change, to me, not to make the change and stay where you are, because it's an opportunity at all points. And then let's moving on to the things to avoid in the job search. These are some of them I have personally experienced as a mistake, and I wish I would have known these beforehand. I am telling you all of these just as a reference. If you encounter some of the situations, try not to do that. First one is do not go with the flow, especially as international students. Your circumstances, situations, skill set, backgrounds are very different than a lot of domestic students, or even with a lot of international students as well. So finding your own path, building it along the way is very important instead of blinding following someone who's already done it. It's kind of contradiction because you're here listening to me talking about journey, but that's a precaution right there that, do not just go with the general flow. The second one is don't underestimate yourself or disencourage yourself. There are a lot of news out there, a lot of changes in policies, a lot of other, dynamics going on in the job market that might discourage you. But in my opinion, don't do that to yourself, because there's a whole bunch of stuff out there that could be not so promising. But for yourself, always stay positive, always stay confident, and think of it as how do I figure it out instead of I cannot figure it out. It's just a positive mindset. And then the third thing is that don't get so caught up in work sponsorship. I see this actually a lot in international students, especially when you're approaching career fairs, where there's a list, especially list out there, people that will offer sponsorship and then people that does not offer sponsorship. And it comes down to from a 200 list to only 10, 20 lists. And you feel like, this is a little frustrating that I only have these options. But some are reality and some are actually more of a perception, in my opinion. So don't get so caught up in the work sponsorship that you're discouraging yourself, but also be realistic enough that to think about solutions for these employers that you want to work for. And lastly, do not compare yourself to others. I cannot stress this enough, because even as international students, you have a lot of different backgrounds, majors, and also your capabilities are very different from each other as well. So it is very important for you to keep sort of a measure in your own mind about yourself instead of comparing to others, which leads to my next key point, things that I would encourage in the job search. First is you will much better off to have a strategic career plan and timeline as early as possible. In my major, back in undergrad hospitality, we did this career plan as early as I think sophomore year, and then throughout the career services here and there, we will all require to sort of provide at least an idea of where you want to be in a few years, sort of like a rough timeline. Of course, there are a lot of things that's going to change, but in that respect, having a plan to adapt to is much better than not having a plan to even refer to. So that's the first thing. And I'm more than open. I've been making these plans for quite a few years now. So ask me if you need any help in terms of kind of making a solid plan or trying to settle some of the goals into an actionable plan. And the second one is monitor your career plan. You might be making this plan for a graduate student, maybe your first year of graduate school, or maybe your first year of doctorate degree. And then you might want to keep track of it on not necessarily a monthly basis per se, but at least quarterly or twice a year in that base and see where you are in that career plan. And then how, for example, your goal and your career plan sets a goal that you're going to find a job in 2 years. And then by the end of the first year, you might want to think about, am I lining up all my network? Am I lining up some of the potential companies that I'm going to research and get into the recruiting season? Some of the actionable goals in there needs to be closely monitored. And then the third one, actually learning from the negotiation classes, being flexible and adaptable. As things really change, you have to change as well in the job search. Especially, for example, this year, the whole job market dynamic has changed drastically, not only for international students, but also for domestic students as well. How do we navigate in such a changing job market? It's a very important skills that you need to have. I think one of the Q&As we have in there also mentioned that how do we navigate a job search in this pandemic, which we will going to address a little in a little bit. But being flexible and adaptable is definitely a skill and also a very important mindset to have in a job search. And the fourth one, I think it's very unique for international students, is that we all come from a global background, which could be a very important asset for a lot of employers, especially for mid-skill or sometimes even for a smaller skill company that wants to go abroad, wants to go bigger. Your global mindset, your diversity could be a great asset to the company. And also in your job search, this would be a great addition to resume. So make sure you capitalize on that and kind of view it in the way as an advantage rather than I'm not a domestic student and this is a disadvantage. Just flip it around and turn it to your advantage. And the second thing is dare. That's what I usually like to say. This is the biggest lesson I've learned in the US compared to my culture. Coming from China, everything is very structured and sort of the culture shock for me. But once I start to adapt in the US, the concept of courage, of dare to try, dare to reach out can give you incredible rewards. I cannot even finish any examples that how many times I can reach out just to a total stranger and turn out to be a great connection and last long time to be a great friendship, professionally and personally. So reaching out and dare to try different things, try different methods of reaching out is a great way to approach your job search as well. And at the end of the day, the worst scenario you'll get is just a no. People don't respond. Actually, based on my experience, I would say 6 out of 10 LinkedIn messages I send out, people don't respond. Not because they don't want to, but maybe 3 out of those didn't even see it. By the time we saw it, it's a couple months later, the message is not validated anymore. So don't feel so personally discouraged if your message or if your reach out is not received or not responded to. And last thing is be the expert on immigration. Amanda definitely would be a great resource on that. And at the same time, be knowledgeable and start learning more about CPT, OPT, and also post-grad. After that, you think about your H-1B or other options in there. Just be super knowledgeable so that you know what to do and you're not being the person stuck in the middle per se, where the employer is not so knowledgeable about your future status and they're confused about what the process and costs was going to be to sponsor your work visa, for example. But you're not knowledgeable enough to provide the information on the spot or even provide the strategy for them to kind of do things to that point. Then you have to come back. There's a little time lag in there that can be a lot of frustration, where back and forth can, sometimes give it away your opportunity. So be the expert on immigration. Our OIA is always a great resource that you can fall back on. On their website, there's a lot of resources as well. So make sure you use that resource. And then following that, let's jump into Q&As. And I believe Amanda's gonna kick it off with some hard immigration questions.
All right, thank you so much, Frank.
Yeah.
So these were some of the pre-submitted questions, and hopefully you've had a chance to listen to the brief recording that I did earlier before this presentation. So in that presentation, I talked about, should I apply for CPT or OPT? So CPT is going to be an internship during your program of study. It has to be an integral part of your curriculum, so you have to be enrolled in an internship course, field placement, practicum, something like that, to show the government and immigration services that that is an actual integral part of your program. Optional practical training is going to be a work permit after graduation. So that's going to be more at the end. If you're post-candidacy PhD, sometimes once you're done with that portion, you're eligible to apply for OPT, but for the majority of people, it's going to be a 12-month work permit after graduation. The next question, how and when do we know if an employer sponsors visas? That's a really great question. And really you just need to ask. So that's a great question for the HR person for the company that you're looking at. A lot of times when you're filling out an employment application, it'll say, do you require sponsorship? If you're applying for CPT or OPT, that's not considered sponsorship. You can do all of that. You apply for all of that yourself. It's when you get to the end of your F1 status, you'll need sponsorship through an employment-based visa like an H-1B. And those things do take time. So I encourage you to ask those questions up front, because you wouldn't want to start working for a company and realize, a month before your OPT runs out that they aren't able to sponsor you. So ask that question, early, and ask the HR representative most likely. The next question, is visa status important? It is very important. I'm not exactly sure what the context of this question was. Basically, you have to be in status to do anything. So you have to be in status to apply for CPT. You have to be in status and maintaining status to apply for OPT. You have to be in status and maintaining status to apply for a change of immigration status. So it is extremely important. Next question, the timeline in applying for OPT during a job search. So you can apply for OPT up to 90 days before your program end date, as well as during the 60 days of your grace period. That CPT is something that we do in-house, and so it's a pretty quick turnaround. The most time-consuming part is getting the paperwork from your employer, getting the paperwork from your academic advisor. OPT is sent out to USCIS, so that process, anytime the government's involved, it's going to be a much lengthier, time-consuming process. So OPT applications right now are taking 3, 4, sometimes 5 months. It really just depends. And you can only apply 90 days before your program end date. So that's something we recommend that students apply as early as possible, just because the timeline of the processing is very unpredictable. And
Amanda, can I interrupt for just a second? For education and human ecology students, if you are looking for a CPT or need help processing it, please reach out to me. I help all the students with the CPT, so I can help them with the forms and getting everything organized to send over to Amanda's office. So it's Dugan.2 if you have some questions about the CPT for our college.
all right, and going along with that, we have a message in the chat. If we use OPT, does that mean that the employer does not need to sponsor a work visa? So that's correct. Basically, OPT is a benefit of your F1 status. So if you're using OPT, you're going to be applying for that. You're going to be paying for that. You handle everything yourself with the government. But the thing is, that's going to end after 1 year, most likely. I don't think, do you have any STEM in EHE, Nancy? Okay, so in the event that you do have a STEM degree and STEM eligible, it has to be on the list of the ICE, Immigrations and Custom Enforcement STEM designated list. You have the possibility of a 3-year OPT, 1 year plus the 2-year STEM extension. But once that's done, you've exhausted all of your options under your F1 status, and then you would need sponsorship to continue working after that. So that would be something that you would need to work with your employer so that they can help you with that. And last question, PhD and immigration options. I'm not entirely sure what that means. If somebody wants to type in the chat, or if you have other immigration questions, feel free to type them in the chat. I'll answer this one about CPT, and then I'll turn it back to Frank for some of the job search questions. And then we can come back if there's any other immigration questions. So can I use CPT if I work outside the university in the last semester as a PhD candidate? That's a good question, and the answer is it depends. So if you are post-candidacy and the work that you're doing is required to gather data that will be included in your dissertation, then you would be able to use CPT. If that's not the case and you just want to start CPT to get a jump on the job search, unfortunately, that wouldn't be an option. You would have to apply for OPT. But that's something we do determine on a case-by-case basis. So I would recommend speaking with an immigration coordinator as early as possible so we can determine if that would be an option for you or not. All right. Back to Frank.
Okay, I'll take over. This happens all the time with them. I'll take over as we go into some job search questions. I see a lot of similar questions, so I kind of sort of group them together so I can answer the questions at the same time in a more comprehensive way. I think while I'm sharing screen, I was having trouble to see the text chats in there. So if there's a text question that you guys see, just let me know. I'll kind of start looking at that. The first question I got was pretty specific on a student athlete. So what recommendations would you give to student athletes looking to continue training in their sports after graduation? So if you're international students or you're domestic students, I actually encountered quite a few student athletes who graduate and excelled in their career as well. One of them I know is the general manager at the hotel. He was the football player in OSU. He went on to be in the same property with me, and then he was a few years older than me. But I don't think training has so much to do with your career change. As long as you have your commitment to the sport and a commitment to your career at the same time, and sort of managing, you have to prioritize your daily routine and also your weekly goals and all that. But you can certainly balance that. But the job recommendations I would make is try to pick something that's, you know, that you can physically and mentally balance the two commitments you have. That's a prerequisite that if you want to look at it. If you're picking a job that's super demanding, that's going to take away some of your energy, time from either of the commitment. It might not be a good fit for you. But the specific individual I speak with, hospitality industry is a very, very consuming industry, and he was able to actually handle both at the same time while maintaining his training. So that's the first thing I would require, is to find something that's not so time consuming. And the second one is make sure you communicate that to your employer, is that you want to keep both commitment at the same time, because it does affect sort of your job performance at the same time. And some other examples that I can say is a very routine office job for 9 to 5, sort of, or a flexible timeline, sort of like a sales-based positions that gives you much more flexibility in terms of your timeline and energy at the same time. So I'm not sure how specific this specific questions want me to get into, but generally that's some of the considerations you want to think about before you want to continue that. And then the second question is job outside of academia for PhDs during pandemic and or alternative academia job searches. It comes with a little bit of a context where this year is a different situation compared to a lot of other years, but alternative academic jobs, I've seen a lot of successful careers out of that. Most likely they're PhD students in usually engineering or high tech or even a sort of a liberal arts area as well. So a lot of them was approaching it from a practical standpoint, researching on what specific applications that your field of study is very important process in here. Is that, you know, for example, electrical engineering, you could have go into a very specific academic focused job in a research facility or a research institute, which outside of university, there are a lot of sponsored research institutes out there that you can still work for if you want that focus. Or if you're thinking about more practical, more sort of a managerial position, you can also go into some of the large corporations, top 500 in their research departments or sort of engineering departments, where you can apply some of your skills and you know, in a more practical way. Or the third route I've seen some graduates or PhD candidates did was they went out to be a mid-level or entry-level engineer or a field expert, and then work up to a managerial or a leadership role in that aspect. And then that's the third route that most people will take. So specifically, it really depends on what PhD you're getting that you would consider some of the jobs. But the process and the 3 career routes is typically these 3 that I've seen over the years. Some of my peers and some of my colleagues that have been dealt with. And how and when do I search for academic jobs abroad? If you're searching for the US and if you're searching for outside of US, the timeline might be a little bit different. In the US, I always say you're always in the market for a job, for a position, for an opportunity. Let's put it that way. So put yourself always ready to take a role, and also market yourself to that. But however, if you are, am I getting a message or something? I feel like my screen's popping up.
I think it's just that I think someone just left.
Oh, okay, cool. always put yourself in the market in case some opportunities come up. But if you're thinking about somewhere that's not where your place of study, it requires a lot of research, and also at the same time, it requires a lot of what do you call it? Work, and also work, and also kind of networking into that. So I would start early for those jobs. I've seen a handful of examples that study in the U.S. and move up to the other countries for academic jobs. Actually, it's a long process, especially interview and all that. Actually, it's a very consuming process, and make sure you're being patient about that. And also at the same time, don't be frustrated if something didn't turn out right. There's so many factors that can get involved, but the simple answer to that question is always be ready, always be in the market. And how, it really depends on where you're going. And we'll get into more in a domestic job in terms of how you approach this job search process. And the next question, how do we find jobs? All these questions that I got is pretty much the same idea, where everybody wanted to learn the job hunting process. Even though it might be a little different for different careers that we're looking at, for me, it was a much more business focused, practical job search. But if you're coming from an academic background, it might look slightly different, because the process usually takes longer and also involves more people. So let's get a little bit more into that, where I did some research and also asked some people where they usually get, is that these are some of the most popular job sites for academic jobs, especially if you're looking for higher education, like a lecturer, or even sort of like a researcher, or even for a higher academic position that you're going to into. These two websites have enormous amount of resources and positions out there. So you might want to take a look at those two and search. Typically they're by institutes, by position, by fields. So make sure you have those informations ready. And I've seen an increasingly amount of job posts, academic job posts on Indeed, on Google Jobs. So if you simply put the keywords that you are searching for, it might also pop up in a Google search as well. So these are some of the websites that you can look into. Then we want to get into the networking part, which I really think for academic students, it's a crucial skills to build. Not because that it's not important for others, other business students or whatsoever, but I think they're not aware of a lot of resources and a lot of skill set that is out there. So I want to go a little bit in depth on networking. A few successful, actually from EHE as well, there are candidates from EHE before, a few successful job search for academic candidates. They were able to basically get in contact with their desired institutes and then go from that point of contact and start to expand their network, basically. It could start as easy as talking to your professor or talking to your advisor on, okay, I'm starting to look for some sort of position. What are your recommended person that I can talk to? Or do you know that some of the job openings out there? That would be a great resource. And as your advisor and as your professor, they might have an ongoing relationship with you. And then the trustworthiness out there is very important as well. And the second thing, a lot of people might feel a little shy to do, feel a little bit of unconfident to do, is that the second step, the building from your initial network to the second point. Let me see. I think someone just commented in there.
Yeah, I've added some helpful hints in the chat, and then a student did just share a good tip is to use the search engines to find the job and then apply directly from the organization's website.
Yeah, definitely. That's a very proper way to apply academic jobs, and also applying for other jobs as well. is to research online. There's tons of resources out there, and do that. And then in terms of networking, the second tier of network that you're trying to build is usually the scariest part, where you're reaching out sort of a half stranger at this point, but showing your ability, showing your craft, some of the achievements you have, and also the sincerity of finding a job. It usually opens quite a few windows in the US. So then starting to build that interconnection, and also start to understand that not only a job is your ultimate goal, but resources, information, the connection, the insights that you're getting from these connections that you have from this network is also invaluable. Don't kind of just focus on whether or not they have a vacancy, but some of the times they will come back to you in the future time to tell you that you have an opportunity or not. That building that how people know you is critical in this process. And also, kind of referring back to how do you know if there's a vacancy, or how do you ask for sponsor? That's sort of a separate question, but let's figure out the availability and a vacancy process. Is having this sort of a network, academic network in your field, keep you informed and updated in most of the time, and make yourself always available to them. Be in the markets, telling them that you're always in search, always open to opportunities. Kind of open these tubes of information where people are going to come back to you and say, hey, there might be an opportunity coming up soon, so you can start preparing for it. And also on the other side, you can directly search online, and you can also search on the institutes that you desire to work on their website, and reach out to their departments and see if they have anything that they don't even know they need, something like that. So, and asking for sponsorship, I think I have another questions down there that is sort of similar. Yeah. So asking for sponsorship, some of employers will be very clear about sponsorship. Like Amanda said, they will directly tell you whether or not they offer sponsorship, and there will be a pretty policy-based answer to your question. And those employers know and have experienced H-1B or other work visa before, and which is, I think most of the employers I've worked for, they are in that situation. They've done it. Some of them like it, some of them didn't like it, so they will make a policy for it. So the second tier of employers, that they're not sure. They've done it maybe once or twice, and some of them have never done work sponsorship. So what they wanted to do is that they want to see how much commitment you need from them. So it is very important that you communicate and be the expert in the immigration field to tell them that, hey, this is what you would need financially and HR work wise, and also at the same time, how much of time that you would need for that. And it could be an ongoing process. For me, my H-1B lottery was 3 years. We did it 3 times, almost 3 times. I was not in luck. So I did it quite a few times. But my employer at that point was not very familiar with the process. But what they did was they go to their attorney, corporate attorney, and they go to someone that would know, as long as they have that interest and they have that commitment to you. So make sure you are that person in that position and the expert of knowledge that you can provide them, that you are of that value to them. But for large corporations, usually it's kind of a standardized policy based yes or no questions. So then we're moving on to a lot more job search questions. First, about diversity. Personally, I feel that diversity is sort of a universal topic in most organizations. There's not much a distinction between the minority groups. So if you are a minority sort of demographic, I think some organizations do the affirmative actions where they actively seek for minority candidates, but some of them will sort of treat them equal at the same time. It doesn't matter what your background or what your ethnic background is. As long as you're of value and you have a solid resume, it doesn't really matter. But to specifically answer this question, I think it is very important that you have the skill set, experience to a specific position rather than focusing so much on the diversity sort of quota or sort of a policy of the organization. And being able to do the job is more important to most employers than not. So if that answers your question. But if you have additional, you can reach out to me. But the second question, given your bicultural background, where do you feel the most comfortable in performing your job? I would say I have a very different culture than a lot of my coworkers. The biggest difficulty that I have encountered is that the initial adjustment to, for example, the American culture, it takes a while from the college years all the way down to the early career. You're sort of like slowly adjusting and trying to mixing your own style and your own cultural identity. It's an ongoing process, not only like a career focus, but on at the workplace. It is very, very important that you recognize the difference between you and your colleagues and your boss or your lower rank peers. But recognizing it doesn't mean that you have to stay that way. Sometimes some of the conversations that I'll be having while I was in management position with my colleagues, I actually have my last hotel that I had, we had people from almost 20 countries working for the same hotel. So the diversity is huge. Being able to recognize it and respect them for their difference and sort of kind of a capitalize on the differences. This is what really important for me. I feel more comfortable when I'm doing things my way, sort of. But at the same time, you have to have the respect and for other people, and also being open to some of the. For example, I was managing some of the domestic or American workers here. Is that their thinking are much more open than most of the culturally different other subnorm other workers that I have down here. So one adjustment is that as a boss, I have to really think about how do I position myself in that conversation and not be offended by some of the remarks. And for me, is that taking myself out of the attitude of or out of the delivery of the conversation, looking at really what the issue is, what the concerns are, really helps me a lot. So taking yourself out of the cultural context sometimes, it will really put you in a much more comfortable mindset in dealing some of the cross-cultural differences. And what types of job do people normally get? This is a really broadcast question. It depends on what your field is. And most of the undergraduate students coming out, they will get an entry level or sort of like a lower level managerial position. And some of the graduate students, or so PhD level, doctor level students, they might get a little bit higher in the rank. But speaking of what type, it really depends on the industry that you want to get into. So I'll leave that to a specific one. And then, which are the best countries to seek job with a US PhD degree? That's a very specific question, and I'll give you a very specific answer. I still think US has one of the best research talents in the world. So if you're focusing on research and we're wanted to have more research resources at your hand, US will be your best country to go in. And I've heard that in quite a few friends and also quite a few doctors that are PhDs that are in the field as well. So it just offers you much more opportunity, to offer much more rooms and capitals to work with what you want to do. And alternatively, if you're not really thinking about staying in the US, Canada could be one if you're thinking about location. And if you're not really so much concerned about location, then UK could be the next option for you. And then what's the best time to prepare for job hunting? First line, always be ready, always in the market. And the second one is understand the recruiting cycle. The spring and the fall recruiting cycle is very important. So for spring recruitment, you usually have to start pretty early. I usually start for spring recruitment at around the end of fall, when the fall recruitment season just ended. Around fall, you start preparing for it. And then as soon as the semester starts, you starting to look for it, starting to reach out, starting to attend some of the networking things that you're starting to see pop up on campus. Make sure you take advantage of those. And usually the actual application happens in typically at the end of February or March is the high season of spring recruitment. And then the whole interview process will go through all the way until end of April for some. And May will be the starting point. And some of them will start in June, or some of them may be negotiable after your summer school is over. And for for fall semester, it usually starts when the semester starts, and it will end when you're about to graduate, basically.
Hey, Frank, we just had a question pop up.
Yeah.
As international students, should we use our legal or preferred names on our resume or our CVs?
I usually go by Frank, and then that's how everybody know me by. But make sure you communicate that to your employer, especially the HR person, because your boss may always call you by your English name. That's no issue at all. My co-workers never even, they sometimes make fun of my legal name, but it was just a very delicate distinction. When it comes to legal issues, you have to communicate to them that this is your legal name. But when it comes to daily communication, it really depends on your preference. But make sure in the interview, you communicate that to the HR person very clearly that this is my legal name. But on the interview process, it's okay. You can use your preferred name in the resume. That's no issue. But while in the doing paperwork, make sure you use your legal name, because I've done that. Yeah. Okay. And I think, do we have more questions down here? Let me see. Oh, lastly, if you have any more questions, feel free to type in the box right now. And these are my contact information. You can reach out to me anytime. I'm pretty much available any point, and I'm always love to talk to OSU students as part of my passion. It was funny, last year at this time, I was doing a similar networking workshop for OSU organization too. But every year I try to stay engaged, as long as I'm in Columbus, you know. But me and Amanda and Nancy will still be here. And if you have any additional Q&As that you want me to answer or want any of us to answer, feel free to type in the chat box. We're all here.
Well, Frank, I have a question for you. So you alluded to you're trying to get a visa to stay here and work in the US. Can you kind of summarize what that process looked like?
Okay, yeah, of course. So let me actually talk about my career process in terms of immigration documents and that process in that aspect. So in college, I was doing various CPT, basically internships along the way. And then down the road, some of them are more of an entry-level job, but on a part-time basis. So I started in the sophomore year doing my first CPT internship in my sophomore year, which was based on the hospitality degree. And Nancy helped me a lot on that. And starting off with my the advisors, and just make sure I was doing 20 hours a week during the school semester and sometimes doing full times during the summer break. So that's depending on the policy change. Amanda will be the best person in terms of how that hour is going to be. But in my process in college, I was doing a lot of CPTs. And in summertime, I might be doing a full-time CPT. So it all comes into my career development. And later on, I was able to negotiate sort of with my employer at the time that I will be working part-time doing school for the hotel specifically. So it kind of started to count as your career experience before you graduate. And after I graduated, I got my 1-year OPT, which I was lucky enough to actually got a couple promotions pretty quickly across 2 organizations. So the first one was rising me up to the managerial position, and then the second one to the director position. We're all between the OPT period, and I was able to do that. And then because sort of the advantage of being the higher level managerial position, the conversation about visa sponsorship kind of changed a little bit. It's not they're sponsoring entry level associate at that point, and also your value has shown throughout the year of work. And also the second thing is that they're not very familiar with the process, so you're being the expert and guiding them, but also making sure that they're committed to the process. And then the third process is that the company actually have to make a financial commitment to your sponsorship. That's, to me at that time, it was a difficult conversation because the lawyer fees and application was a substantial amount of money for example, for a smaller organization, that's a substantial amount of money. But for a larger organization, it might be a little different. But making sure you're communicating very clearly with them on how much they're going to pay, and also how long the process, and also this was the even tougher one. The chances are how much you're going to get the lottery, or for example, I'm talking about H-1B. How much the chances you're going to get the H-1B, or how much risk that they're taking in terms of their fees they're paying. So all these, you got to communicate very clearly with your employer, but the key point is you showing that you are worth the money. That's the very important question. That if at any point the employer feel like maybe it's a little over our budget, it's not really of your control to decide that. But I think as a candidate, it's very important that you sell yourself at a decent price, so that the employer is gonna be basically say, I think you're worth it. That's basically my journey. And I got a couple years of a lottery. And after the first lottery didn't go through, so I was actually doing CPT again. I signed up for an MBA program, and I was doing CPT while I was in the program. And my employer was providing a lot of flexibility in terms of hours and everything. So while I was in school, I was able to do that. And then we're doing over and over again over the lottery thing but that commitment is very important. So making sure you have that ongoing partnership with your employers, and the conversation with your employer is very important. So that's sort of my journey in terms of immigration.
Thanks, Frank.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions? If you want to put them in the chat, we've got a couple more minutes. I just want to, thank you all for participating and asking some really great questions.
I think we got a question. Could you share some experience when you were working in consulting? Yeah, of course. So my consulting was mostly in the operation consulting. I do it for hotel and hospitality related businesses, actually. It was under umbrella. Oh, you're welcome. It was under umbrella company. So basically we have a team of consultants that are from different backgrounds. Some of them are more experienced than some others, and some of them have more academic knowledge like me, very specific and systematic thinking. So what we're it's not your traditional consulting firms, the traditional big four or the traditional consultancies that you're thinking about. We're looking more at the smaller scale consulting to smaller business and a mid scale in the local level. So that was my consulting experience. But I also have encountered a few consultants in the big financial institutes. They are very rigid in terms of the training and also the processes. So they're quite different than our small consultancy. If that answers your questions. And oh, that's Nancy. You're welcome.
That was me.
Any other questions that we can help you with? That's a lot of thanks there, Nancy.
There. Yeah, and we've in the chat, we have put our emails. So if you have questions for Amanda or for myself, our emails are in there. So it's usco.8 and dugan.2, and we can answer any of your questions. We're right at the hour mark. So I want to thank you all for participating, and you'll be getting an email survey from me probably tomorrow. So please fill that out and return that. And I hope you all have a really awesome evening.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Well, thanks everybody.
Thanks.
This is, oh, hi, Dr. Curtis.
Hello.
Hi, really great session. I only caught the last 20 minutes, but really great session, and congratulations. It's the first of, we hope, many. So
Yeah.
anyway, thank you so much for sharing your experience. Bye, Nancy, and nice to meet you, Amanda.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right, thanks. Well, thanks everybody. I
Good
appreciate
job,
it.
Frank. That was awesome.
Yeah, thanks Frank for like
You're welcome. You're
answering
welcome.
all the
Always a pleasure.
questions, doing all the things and everything.
Man, always trying to, every time after I graduate, it feels like an honor to get back involved with campus. It always feels like a privilege to kind of give back to your OSU.
Well, and you have such great experience, and I think you answer their questions, kind of what they want to hear or what they need to hear. So, I appreciate that because, I could say it, but maybe they wouldn't believe me as much as they believe you.
It's always to say the same words to appear, sometimes. It's just, it's that dilemma that people are facing.
Well, thanks again, everybody, and have a good evening. And once I get more information back from the survey, I'll let you know how everything went. But
yeah, that'd be great. If I can get a little feedback, I'll improve myself.
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, I'll talk to you later. Thanks, guys.
Have a good night.